My stepson texted me at 3 a.m. saying, "Pack your bags, we're done supporting dead weight." This after I'd been secretly paying his mortgage for 2 years while he bragged about his success to everyone. So I decided to show him what real charity looks like. When the foreclosure notice arrived and he came crawling back, what I offered him instead left him speechless. Before I share what happened, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what brings you to my story today. Your support means everything to me. My name is Margaret, and for 35 years, I built bridges. Not the kind that span rivers or connect cities, but the invisible ones that hold families together across the treacherous gaps of pride, misunderstanding, and old wounds. As a family mediator, I spent my career teaching people that relationships, like any solid structure, require constant maintenance, careful attention to stress points, and most importantly, a foundation built on mutual respect. When I married Robert 5 years ago, I thought I understood the blueprint for blended families. His son, Jake, was 28, supposedly self-sufficient, running his own digital marketing agency. My own children lived across the country, so I threw myself into being the stepmother I wish I'd had growing up. I wanted to prove that second marriages could create something beautiful, that broken families could be rebuilt stronger than before. Robert had raised Jake as a single father after his wife left when Jake was 12. He'd poured everything into that boy, working double shifts to pay for private school, college, business courses. Jake's my greatest achievement, he'd tell anyone who'd listen, his chest swelling with pride. Built his business from nothing, never asked for help. What Robert didn't know, what Jake made sure he never knew, was that his golden boy's success was a carefully constructed illusion, a house of cards balanced on my bank account. It started innocently enough 6 months after Robert and I moved in together. Jake showed up at our door one evening, his usual confident swagger replaced by something that looked almost vulnerable. He needed a small loan, he said, just to cover a cash flow problem. A big client was late paying, but he had this amazing opportunity that required immediate action. "He just need $5,000, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I'll pay it back in 30 days with interest. I just can't ask Dad. You know how he is about money, and I don't want him to worry." I understood completely. Robert was old school, believed in earning your way, never living beyond your means. Jake asking for money would shatter something fundamental in their relationship. So I wrote the check, thinking I was protecting both of them. The 30 days came and went. Jake had excuses, always apologetic, always promising next week, next month. The $5,000 became 10, then 20. What started as a small favor to smooth over a temporary rough patch gradually revealed itself as something much more serious. Jake's business wasn't just having cash flow problems, it was hemorrhaging money. But the real genius of Jake's manipulation wasn't in the amounts he asked for. It was in how he made me feel like his partner, his confidant, the only person who truly understood the pressures he was under. He'd call me during the day when Robert was at work, his voice heavy with manufactured gratitude. "Margaret, I don't know what I'd do without you," he'd say. "You're not just helping me save my business, you're helping me save my relationship with Dad. He's so proud of what he thinks I've built. I can't bear to let him down." He played on every maternal instinct I'd never been able to fully express with my own distant children. He made me feel needed, essential, like I was finally fulfilling my role in this reconstructed family. The monthly mortgage payments I started covering weren't just financial assistance, they were emotional infrastructure, the hidden support beams holding up the beautiful facade of his success. For 2 years, I quietly transferred money into his accounts, mortgage payments, business expenses, the lease on his expensive downtown office. The amounts grew larger, the requests more frequent, but they were always presented as investments in our family's stability. Jake would show up to Sunday dinners at our house with expensive wine and stories about his latest client victories, while Robert beamed with paternal pride. "Did you hear Jake landed that pharmaceutical contract?" Robert would say, raising his glass. $20,000 a month guaranteed. I knew that boy had it in him. I would smile and nod, knowing that the $20,000 was fantasy, that Jake's real income barely covered his coffee habit, and that the mortgage payment I'd made that morning was the only thing standing between his success story and complete collapse. The psychological toll of maintaining this fiction was enormous. I wasn't just keeping Jake's secret, I was actively participating in the deception of my own husband. Every proud word Robert spoke about his son was a small knife in my conscience. I was enabling a lie that went to the very heart of their relationship. But I told myself I was protecting both of them. Robert's faith in Jake was so complete, so fundamental to his identity as a father, that the truth would devastate him. And Jake, for all his manipulation, seemed genuinely terrified of disappointing his father. I convinced myself that I was buying time, that eventually Jake would find his footing, and my financial support would transition from necessity to family legend. I was building their relationship on a foundation of my own sacrifice, but I failed to see that a structure built on deception, no matter how well-intentioned, is always doomed to collapse. The warning signs were there long before the final explosion. Jake's gratitude began to feel practiced, mechanical. The promises to pay me back became vaguer, more distant. Worst of all, his attitude toward me started to shift from grateful appreciation to something that looked uncomfortably like entitlement. It started with small comments about my spending habits. I'd buy myself something nice, a piece of jewelry or a weekend trip with friends, and Jake would make jokes about how easy it must be to spend money when you don't have real responsibilities. He'd say it with a smile, like it was just friendly teasing, but there was an edge to it that made my skin crawl. "Must be nice to be retired," he'd say when I mentioned a spa day. "Some of us are out here grinding every day to build something." The irony was suffocating. He was talking about grinding and building while I was literally funding his entire existence. But calling out the hypocrisy would mean exposing the secret, betraying the trust that had become the prison of our relationship. The psychological manipulation reached its peak during family gatherings. Jake had mastered the art of public gratitude that somehow managed to make me feel small and insignificant. He'd make grand toasts about how blessed he was to have such a supportive family, how his success was proof that hard work always pays off, how he was grateful to be independent and self-sufficient. "To Jake," Robert would say, raising his glass with tears of pride in his eyes, "who never needed anyone's help to build his dreams." And Jake would look directly at me as he accepted the praise, his smile a perfect mask over what I now recognized as pure contempt. He wasn't grateful for my help. He despised me for witnessing his weakness, for knowing the truth behind his carefully constructed image. My generosity had become a source of shame for him, and he was beginning to hate me for it. The final insult came on a Tuesday night in March. I was in bed, reading, when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jake, sent at 3:17 a.m., the timestamp itself suggesting he'd been drinking or worse. The message was short, brutal, and utterly devastating. "Pack your bags. We're done supporting dead weight. Find somewhere else to mooch. You've been bleeding this family dry long enough." I stared at the words, reading them over and over, my mind refusing to process their meaning. Dead weight? Mooch? Bleeding the family dry? This was coming from the man whose mortgage I'd been paying for 2 years, whose entire lifestyle I'd been subsidizing, whose relationship with his father I'd been protecting through my silence. The psychological violence of the accusation was breathtaking. He had taken everything I'd given him, every sacrifice I'd made, and twisted it into evidence of my own parasitic nature. In his revisionist history, I wasn't the secret benefactor holding his world together. I was the burden, the charity case, the dead weight dragging down his success. I called him immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The call went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. He wasn't just rejecting my calls, he was actively sending them to digital silence, the coward's ultimate weapon. I sent a text back, my thumbs clumsy with shock and hurt. "Jake, what are you talking about? We need to discuss this." The response came back within minutes. "Nothing to discuss. Dad's finally seeing what everyone has known for years. You're using him, using us. Time to cut the dead weight loose." The cruelty was surgical in its precision. He wasn't just attacking me, he was claiming to speak for Robert, implying that my husband, the man I loved and had been trying to protect, had somehow turned against me. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare designed to make me feel completely alone and utterly powerless. But Jake had made one crucial miscalculation. He assumed that I would continue to protect his secret, even as he destroyed me with it. He thought he could burn down our relationship while keeping the financial foundation I'd built for him intact. He had no idea that his contempt had just awakened something in me that had been sleeping for too long. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Robert's peaceful breathing beside me, I realized that my 2 years of secret generosity hadn't built a bridge between Jake and his father. I had built a trap, and I was the only one caught in it. By morning, I had decided it was time to spring the mechanism and see who would be left standing when the dust settled. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, 2 years' worth of bank statements, and a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Robert had left for work, kissing me goodbye with the same gentle affection he showed every morning, completely unaware that his wife was about to demolish the carefully constructed fiction of his family's financial stability. But I wasn't.
Dad, thank God I've been trying to reach you. There's been a huge misunderstanding with Margaret, and now she's trying to destroy my business out of spite. I know it sounds crazy, but... I know about the money, Jake, Robert interrupted, his voice flat and cold. All of it. Every payment, every lie, every month you've been taking from Margaret while pretending to be successful. Jake's face went white. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. The master manipulator had finally been caught in a lie too big to spin. Dad, I can explain. Explain what? How you called the woman who's been saving your life for 2 years deadweight? How you told her to pack her bags after she's been paying your mortgage? I stepped into view behind Robert, and Jake's expression shifted from panic to something that looked almost like hatred. In his mind, I'd violated this secret pact of his deception. I'd exposed him, destroyed his carefully constructed image, taken away his father's pride. Margaret, please, he said, his voice taking on a wheedling, manipulative tone I now recognized as his signature move. We can work this out. I know I said some things I didn't mean, but we're family. Family helps each other. You're absolutely right, Jake. Family does help each other. That's why I helped you for 2 years. But family also respects each other, appreciates each other, treats each other with basic human dignity. I pulled out a manila envelope I'd prepared for this moment. Since you're so committed to independence and self-sufficiency, I thought you might appreciate this. I handed him the envelope. Inside was a continued copy of every payment I'd made on his behalf, totaling just over $120,000, along with a simple letter. That's a complete accounting of what real deadweight looks like. And here's what I'm doing with that money now. I handed him a second envelope. This one contained a letter from the Riverside Family Support Center thanking me for my substantial monthly donation and describing the families it was helping, real families facing real hardships, who were using the assistance to rebuild their lives with dignity and genuine gratitude. Your mortgage payments are now housing a single mother and her 2 children while she finishes nursing school. Your office rent is helping a veteran with PTSD get back on his feet. Your car payments are helping a family whose father lost his job due to a factory closure. Jake stared at the documents, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally a crushing understanding of what he'd lost. You can't do this, he whispered. I'll lose everything. The house, the business, my reputation. You never had any of those things, Jake, Robert said quietly. You had Margaret's generosity and my ignorance. Now you have the chance to build something real, something that's actually yours. But what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to survive? The question hung in the air, pathetic and revealing. For all his talk of success and grinding and building, Jake had never actually learned how to take care of himself. He'd gone straight from his father's support to mine, never developing the skills or character necessary for genuine independence. You're going to do what millions of people do every day, I said. You're going to get a job, live within your means, and build a life based on reality instead of fiction. You're going to learn what it means to actually earn what you have. And if you ever speak to Margaret with disrespect again, Robert added, his voice carrying a quiet menace I'd never heard before, you'll learn what it means to lose a father as well as a benefactor. Jake left that day with nothing but the clothes on his back and the crushing weight of his own consequences. The foreclosure proceeded on schedule. His business, which had never been profitable, collapsed within weeks. His expensive lifestyle, built on the foundation of my secret generosity, crumbled into dust. But here's what Jake never expected, what his narcissistic worldview couldn't comprehend. Losing him was not a loss for me. It was a liberation. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the community center where I volunteer 3 days a week with the Riverside Family Support Center. I'm helping Maria Santos review applications for our housing assistance program, reading stories of real struggle and genuine need from people who understand the difference between help and entitlement. Mrs. Henderson, I hope you know that your contribution has literally saved lives. The Rodriguez family just sent us pictures from their daughter's high school graduation. She's the first in her family to finish school, and it's because your support gave them stability during the hardest year of their lives. I smile, feeling a warmth and satisfaction I never experienced during my years of secretly funding Jake's lies. That's exactly what I hoped for, Maria. Real help for people who will use it to build something lasting. Robert has been transformed by the experience as well. The revelation of Jake's deception was initially devastating, but it opened his eyes to truths he'd been avoiding for years. His son wasn't the self-made success story Robert had believed. He was a manipulative adult child who had never learned accountability or genuine gratitude. I raised him to believe he was entitled to success without earning it. I thought I was building his confidence, but I was actually building his selfishness. Maybe this crisis will finally teach him what I should have taught him years ago. The most beautiful part of this entire experience has been watching Robert's relationship with his son slowly, carefully rebuild on a foundation of honesty instead of illusion. Jake did eventually find work, an entry-level position at a marketing firm that pays a fraction of what he used to claim he earned. He lives in a modest apartment, drives a used car, and for the first time in his adult life, he's living within his actual means. He still hasn't apologized to me directly, but Robert says he asks about me sometimes, and there's something in his questions that suggests he's beginning to understand what he lost. Not just the money, but the relationship with someone who genuinely cared enough to sacrifice her own financial security for his stability. He asked me if you'd ever consider having dinner with him. He said he has things he needs to say to you. I'm not ready for that conversation yet, and I may never be. But I've learned something important about charity, about family, about the difference between enabling someone and actually helping them. True generosity isn't about giving people what they want, it's about giving them what they need, even when what they need is consequences. The family I'm supporting now at the Riverside Center understands this. They send thank you notes, they provide updates on their progress, and they treat the assistance as a bridge to independence rather than a permanent entitlement. They're using help to build something real, something lasting, something worthy of the investment. That's the difference between charity and manipulation, between gratitude and entitlement, between building someone up and propping up their illusions. I spent 2 years learning that lesson, and it cost me over $100,000, but the education was worth every penny. Jake called me deadweight, and in a way, he was right. I was deadweight in his life, but not in the way he meant. I was the deadweight of his lies, the unnecessary burden of maintaining a fiction that served no one. By removing that weight, by forcing him to carry the actual weight of his own choices, I gave him something far more valuable than money. I gave him the chance to become a person worth being proud of. As I sit here now, reviewing applications from families who face their struggles with honesty and dignity, I realize that the best foundations aren't built with money. They're built with character, with honesty, with the kind of strength that comes from facing reality instead of hiding from it. Jake is finally learning to build that kind of foundation for himself. And I, for the first time in years, am building something worthy of my own investment, a life where my generosity goes to people who understand its value and use it to create something beautiful. That's not deadweight. That's the foundation for something that will last. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever found yourself supporting someone who treated your kindness like weakness, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the chance to stand on their own 2 feet. even when that means watching them fall first.